Today, somewhere on Earth is going to discover the Azores in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Everyone has heard of the Azores anticyclone, named after these volcanic islands that emerged from the depths of the sea. Mauro, a young sailor who lives in Flores, braves the severe winter storms. Joao has chosen to live in São Miguel between sea and sky. He's fascinated by the sea and has now become an enthusiastic paraglider. Whenever he gets the chance, he spreads his wings and soars above the volcanoes. Nilton is the man of Pico. His island is the most impressive of the Azores. It's the roof of the archipelago. From this mountain peak, Nilton can feast his eyes on the immensity of the Atlantic through a sea of clouds.
When I climb up here to the summit, I don't think about anything. It empties my mind totally. It's just the sky, the silence, and the mountain. I forget everything else. I feel totally at peace.
The Azores. Most people are familiar with the name, but would have a hard time locating them on a map. The Azores are not really Europe anymore, but not yet America. This Portuguese archipelago, a long way from any continent, is made up of 9 islands, lost out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. A trip to the Azores means entering into a different dimension of time and space. The geological history of these islands is quite complex. Each one of them is a testimony to the incredible seismic activity begun millions of years ago. In the beginning, there was water and fire. These volcanic islands form a fantastic bridge between the sky, the earth, and the sea. Somewhere out in the Atlantic Ocean, the archipelago of the Azores thrust up into the air and the light. In the extreme west of the group are Flores and Corvo, the smallest and most isolated islands of the Azores. For centuries, they have remained separated from the rest of the world. Mauro is the captain of the Santa Iria, the boat that does the regular run between these 2 westernmost islands. His small coaster is a vital link for the inhabitants of Corvo. Freight is transported by sea between the islands. Mauro was born into a family of seafarers. He's doing the same run between Corvo and Flores that his grandfather did more than 60 years ago.
First off, if I didn't have such a strong attachment to the sea, to the nature here, to this island, and to the people here, I wouldn't have such a strong desire to stay here. I don't know. I probably could live somewhere else, but only if I really had to. I could adapt to somewhere else, but I would never leave this place of my own free will, not for anything in the world.
The story of how these islands were discovered remains steeped in mystery. Very old sea charts indicate bits of land marked Atlantis. But the official history is that the Azores were discovered in 1427 by Diego de Silves, a Portuguese navigator who had set out to discover the New World. According to an age-old legend, the Azores are all that is left of the mythical continent of Atlantis after it sank beneath the sea. And what if Atlantis, that utopian world, did in fact look like these islands? This is the home of the well-known Azores anticyclone, a high-pressure zone that influences the weather of all of Europe. In winter, the islanders have a front-row seat on the great meteorological phenomena. Here, sea and nature do their worst. And the island of Flores, in the front line, bears the full brunt of the Atlantic storms. The island's harbors provide very little protection from the lashing sea. All the boats have been beached to keep them out of harm's way. All except one, the Santa Iria. Before nightfall, Mauro, the captain of the boat buffeted by the angry sea, will lock horns with the elements.
We can't beach the boat. This boat has to go to Corvo twice a week. So we don't have the time to get the Santa Iria on dry land. And that's why she has to stay in the water.
The Santa Iria's mission is bringing supplies in for the families on Corvo. What's an easy run in good weather becomes a dangerous expedition in conditions like these. The Santa Iria is stuck in port. It's impossible to sail.
I dropped 4 anchors and 6 or 7 mooring lines on the bow and 4 on the stern, 2 on either side, because the waves are hitting us head on, in line with the port. There's no way we would get any sleep anyway. We'll spend the night here checking the lines, and we'll keep an eye on the sea to see if it gets worse or not.
By nightfall, they've made the boat as secure as possible. Now, the only thing they can do is cross their fingers and hope for the best. The worst of the storm is still to come. The night promises to be very trying for the captain of the Santa Iria. The jetties are ineffective against the raging storm. It seems as if the angry sea is trying to swallow up Santa Cruz, the main city of Flores.
The door's stuck. We can't get it open. We want to get the car out of the way, but we can't. The tide's coming in. The waves are going to keep getting higher. It's getting worse. In an hour, it'll even be worse. More wind. Normally, it should calm down by tomorrow. Normally.
The Azores are exposed to the full brunt of the storms. Out in the middle of the Atlantic, there are no obstacles to stop the swell and waves. All during the winter, low-pressure systems are born along the east coast of North America and sweep across the Azores to end up in the sky of Europe. It takes 4 or 5 days for a storm to cross the Atlantic from west to east. Ever since the dawn of time, the Azores have been at the heart of this meteorological phenomenon. Here in the port of Lajes, the wind has increased a notch. Mauro has come to check that the Santa Iria's lines are holding fast.
We're sheltered for the moment because the winds are in from the southeast. It's bad, really bad, and it's going to get worse. During the night, the wind is going to shift in this direction. And I have to make sure the lines will hold. The boat is going to pull on this line when the wind shifts. We're okay for now. I can't get on board at night. It's too dangerous. It's even dangerous right here. The waves could get worse tonight. The only thing I can do is keep a close watch. Stay alert. And that's all. We're protected by the church. It wards off the bad weather. All the churches face the sea, so there's always someone watching over us.
All through the night, the island is lashed by the wind and rain. At daybreak, the little mountain cascades have swollen into powerful torrents gushing from the cliffs. Battered by the raging forces of nature, Flores is suffering the worst storm of the winter. For more than a week now, the land and sea have been facing off in a violent clash. There's no more sky, no more sea. Here, out in the middle of the Atlantic, life has come to a standstill. Under these conditions, the inhabitants of Flores stay holed up in their homes. They hunker down and wait for the calm after the storm. The Santa Iria has weathered the storm. Another ship joins it in the port. The Setsidach, the largest freighter in the Azores, has a stopover of a few hours here. It ships goods between the 9 islands of the Azores. The containers have to be offloaded very quickly. The dockers have only a few hours to carry out their task. The lull in the weather won't last long. After days of waiting, the crew gets busy on the deck of the Santa Iria. The sea has become calm, but the young Captain Mauro is still worried. The storm has caused a heavy swell. In these conditions, docking maneuvers in the port of Corvo can prove quite dangerous.
I love the sea more than anything. I like everything about this island. The peace and quiet. The people. My family. It's so peaceful. I like everything about living on Flores. It's a wonderful place to live. I'll never leave.
In the Azores, the islanders are used to the storms, and everyone has learned to live with them. No one tries to strike a bargain with the sea. This winter, Corvo was cut off from the rest of the world for 20 days. Joao grew up on São Miguel, the main island of the Azores. His childhood, spent on his grandfather's fishing boat, gave him an unbounded love of the sea.
It's simple. I come from a family of seafarers. My grandfather was a fisherman, and the sea played an important role all through my childhood. My uncles were divers, so I, of course, was drawn to diving, snorkeling, and spearfishing. I learned scuba diving. Then, I began to work at the university as a marine biology technician. Over the years, the sea has come to play a central role in my life.
A few years ago on these cliffs here, Joao's life changed completely.
As soon as my feet left the earth, I was swept up by the sky and became totally hooked. The day I discovered paragliding, I fulfilled the dream of all mankind, to fly. And once in the air, there's absolutely no limit.
Flying. For Joao, it has become as necessary as breathing. It's his gateway to the realm of the sky and nature. The sparrowhawk is the symbol of these sea-bound lands. And in fact, it was the vast population of these birds here, which the settlers called Azores, that gave its name to these islands. Joao is 52 and soars over these islands all year round. Even so, they still have surprises in store for him. The sky, the land, and the sea. The Azorians live surrounded by nature, which they protect and respect. The sperm whale is the lord of the Azores. The whalers here hunted this legendary animal until the late 1980s. The Azores still live to the rhythms of the whale migrations. All year round, there are whales passing through the waters of this mid-Atlantic archipelago. Each island is an underwater sanctuary. Up until the end of the 19th century, American whaling ships would come here to hunt sperm whale. The captains would take on the young Azorians, who were excellent sailors and skillful, tireless whalers. Whaling in the Azores is now a thing of the past. Once the golden age of whaling ended, the fishermen turned to tuna and bonito. Ever since these islands were first inhabited, the ocean has been a food locker. The fishermen joke that any rank beginner can come and catch as many fish as he ever dreamed of. They still fish the old way, with a pole and a line. In the 20th century, once the American ships left, the Azorians hunted the whales with harpoons and longboats. Traditional whaling was a fair fight. the combat between man and beast lasted for hours. In 1986, the International Whaling Commission passed a worldwide ban on hunting sperm whales. The Azorians will never again hunt the king of the oceans. These images of the past are part of the history of the Azores. They are engraved in Joao's memory. He was 20 at the time.
Years ago, when they'd hunt whales at San Miguel, the water would be red with blood. All the whale blood and remains would flow down the slipway and back into the sea. As the current carried it off, it would form a swath of blood, and that would attract great white sharks. This is a great white shark the fishermen caught 2 miles out from the port of Villafranca. That's me in the picture. The white shark was over 5 meters long. It was enormous.
The fishermen of São Miguel are back in port after 12 hours at sea. This is one of the last fishing trips of the season for these men. They've made a pretty good catch. The bonito season in the Atlantic is drawing to an end. The tuna, the main source of revenue for these fishermen, won't be back in the Azores for several months.
We Azorians have a strong bond with the sea, like all the Portuguese. For fishermen and navigators, it's a genetic heritage that's been handed down from generation to generation. We are a people of the sea.
This morning, Joao is heading for the northeast point of São Miguel. It's a wild spot, even more isolated than an island.
Nordeste has always been known as the 10th island of the Azores. The people here remind me of my childhood and my grandparents' village. It was a place where nobody had to lock their doors. The people are very friendly here, hospitable. It's a place where you're always welcome.
As soon as the conditions are right, Joao grabs his paraglider and takes to the air. He's planning to spend a few days here on the Nordeste point. It's a breathtaking, timeless setting. This simple little village, no more than a jumble of cabins, is happy home to the families of the northeast region.
O peixe está a morder como é? A pescaria está a dar aí com esse mau tempo todo. Então, tudo bem, boa tarde.
His friend José's cabin makes an ideal base camp for Joao. Not very big, but the real appeal of this spot lies elsewhere. The Arnell Lighthouse is perched out at the ends of the earth. There are always 2 keepers living here.
Sorry. Tentar. Mas aí a meteorologia, o que é que dizes? O que é que achas disso? Sim, praticamente.
The conditions are not ideal for paragliding today, but a window of good weather could open up in a few hours. Here in the heart of the Atlantic, it's possible to enjoy all 4 seasons in a single day.
Here on San Miguel, as in other parts of the Azores, you feel like you're far removed from the civilized world, mainly on account of the silence. There are very few people. All through the Azores, you can find these little patches of true paradise. You have a feeling of freedom, almost of abandon. You're alone on the cliff. The only things to keep you company are the lighthouse and the sound of the sea. It's natural for us to live here. Nature is in our blood here in the Azores. The territory is so small that if we ruin it, we'll suffer the backlash. I broke my spine. I had 6 fractures on just one vertebra. They had to take some bone from here to put it there. I had to have a spleen operation. I cracked my head open. I had a compound fracture of the tibia. I fractured both heels, and all that in a single accident. These tattoos are my passions. Sharks, my trip around the world with a stopover in Polynesia. Here's my guardian angel for paragliding. And there's room for lots more to come. Right now it's blowing at about 18 kilometers an hour with gusts up to 22. Not great flying conditions, but it'll do. I'm gonna go for it. People that fly are often asked what they feel. It's hard to explain. Me, I feel this well-being when I fly. Even if I'm having personal or professional problems, you get this liberation of your thoughts. You're alone with yourself. There's just the wind, the birds. You enjoy the landscape. No 2 flights are ever the same. It's a mixture of feelings. It's like breathing.
In a few days, Joao will be heading for the Himalayas. He's already sailed around the globe, Now he's going to fulfill another dream, to spread his wings on the roof of the world. The island of Pico is the most extraordinary, the most bewitching, the most majestic of the Azores. It's the Black Island. Its cliffs are bordered by vast stretches of lava. The craggy teeth of basaltic rock, as sharp as razors, thrust out into the ocean. They look positively frightening. Nilton, like many young islanders, could have let himself be lured away by the bright lights of Lisbon. Yet, he has never been off his island. Nilton has remained close to nature.
The contrast between the black lava and the color of the waves, the power of the sea, all this energy. It's really majestic. Only an islander understands just how much you can miss the sea when you're away from it. When I'm here, with all the energy that the sea is giving off, it makes me wonder what the eruption of the volcano must have been like, some 300,000 years ago. Well, of course I wasn't here for that, but it must have been grandiose. A volcano that thrusts up out of the sea. It must have been overwhelming. I would have liked to have seen that.
The island of Pico is situated at the junction of the Eurasian, American, and African tectonic plates. Pico has a unique place in the geological history of the Azores. The volcano is a nearly perfect cone. It's the highest peak of the Azores, culminating at 2,351 meters above the Atlantic Ocean. Pico is a fantastic link between sky and earth. In this boundless landscape of volcanic rock, the island of Pico jealously guards its secrets. It's the youngest of the islands, born 300,000 years ago. Ever since he was a child, Nilton has dreamed of unlocking the secrets of his island. Like the enigma of this abandoned seaside village in ruins.
We don't really know the story of this village, except that we do know it was one of the island's very first villages, and that it was abandoned years ago, but we don't exactly know why. Most likely on account of the severe storms that always surely did a lot of damage. The Azores have always been poor. Nobody wanted to work the stone. When someone settled here, it was out of necessity. Then if people stay, it's because the Azores have a special sort of energy. That's why I never left. And frankly, I just love it here.
The volcano is an imposing monument anchored in a vast expanse of ocean. Sailors can spot it from several dozen kilometers out at sea. The French author Chateaubriand describes it in his Memoirs from Beyond the Tomb. This volcano long dominated unsailed seas, a vain beacon by night, an unobserved landmark by day.
Mount Pico is a unique spot. It has so much energy. Here, we're in the center of the 9 islands out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and Pico is even more special because it's a peak in the middle of nowhere. And it acts like a kind of barometer for the wind and clouds. The old-timers in the neighboring islands would observe this mountain to forecast the weather.
To fully appreciate the beauty of the island, you have to take the time to climb the mountain and get above the clouds.
Today's perfect. I'd rather come up here when it's like this. Now, with the clouds like this, it's like we're in the middle of a film by Hitchcock. The atmospheric conditions can be severe, so you have to be well prepared to resist the wind, the cold, and the rain. It may not be very high, but the conditions can be just like those up on a high mountain.
Pico is a land of adventure. The climb can be quite risky. The clouds and mist can move in just a few minutes, making it impossible to continue up to the summit. For more than 500 years, people have been living here and sculpting the volcanic landscape. In this mineral realm, it takes determination to cultivate the rocky soil covered in basalt.
The men of Pico are known for being very strong and working the stone. The history of Pico is a history of stone. The houses are made of stone, so are the roads, and even the vineyards. It's all about stone here, all about working the stone.
These black stone walls shelter a treasure that very nearly disappeared. Pico is well known for its vineyards. They produce a distinctive wine called the Verdelho. In the olden times, the island's wine would travel all the way to the fine tables of the USA, Europe, and Russia. They say that even the Tsars were quite fond of Pico's wine. For centuries, the wine growers and fishermen of the Azores have been working their vineyards with pick and shovel. George, Nilton's uncle, recently inherited a hectare of abandoned land.
I cleared all this land. It took me 90 days of hard work. I burned all the brush, repaired the walls, and replanted vine stocks, and all on my own.
It will take 5 years in the shelter of this jumble of basalt walls before George's vineyard begins to yield wine. Over time, the islanders have learned how to draw their strength from the very soul of the stone. A few years ago, UNESCO designated Pico's vineyards a World Heritage Site. So this maze of walls will continue to protect these precious vines from the brutal winter storms. Nilton has worked as a bartender and skipper. He has managed a discotheque, and now he is the head of a local association of mountain guides. The volcano is his favorite stamping grounds.
There's a quality of life here that has meaning. It's calm, there's peace and quiet. Nature, the rain, the sea, it's something money just can't buy. You're at one with the island here. You merge with it, and it's wonderful.
Nilton's passion for the mountain gives him a particular outlook on the world and leads him to explore new horizons. In the Azores, there are hundreds of caves and underground galleries. Some of them run for more than 5 kilometers, and the island of Pico is a real Swiss cheese.
I discovered this cave by accident about 2 years ago. I was coming down the mountainside, and I noticed this clump of bushes. You see, when there are pits, the herders usually leave the vegetation around them to prevent the cows from falling in. The first time I came was with Walter, through another entrance. And when we saw the cave, we realized it was enormous.
Walter, já cheguei. Vou só tirar o equipamento e já podes descer.
This is the second time that Nilton and his friend Walter have explored this cave. It's an old lava flow. On Pico, they discover new underground chambers like this every year. In the dark depths, we venture into a new world of silence and dreams.
Not many people know about these spots. We're really lucky. We're a bit like modern-day explorers, like the Portuguese who discovered Brazil and the West Indies. Discovering new caves here on Pico is really a treat for us. The herders used to dump their old and sick animals down into the caves because it was too hard to dig holes here on the island. The ground is too hard. So now when we come down here to map the caves, we find cow bones, dog bones, pig bones. I'll go see if there's a passage there or if it's a dead end.
It's a dead end.
Walter and Nilton are trained speleologists. The regional government has commissioned them to catalog and map the newly discovered caves. Their survey will yield a list of the major galleries on the islands. Maybe someday this cave will be open to the public.
327.
In the Azores, the volcanoes and the inhabitants share the same destiny. When the early explorers landed on these uninhabited islands in the middle of the Atlantic, they surely discovered a frightening level of volcanic activity. This archipelago was born of centuries of countless underwater earthquakes and eruptions. Here on Fayal, the next island over from Pico, the last major eruption took place in 1957, when one fine day the Capelinos, an underwater volcano, awoke from its slumber. The eruption lasted 13 months. This island of sand and stone thrust up from the ocean floor. In 1957, the Capelinos volcano radically changed the age-old landscape. The eruption destroyed a fishing village. The only thing left is the lighthouse. The lighthouse that witnessed the birth of these cliffs surging up from the depths of the Atlantic now stands abandoned. And due to the wind and the waves, the Capelinos volcano is being transformed. Maybe erosion will someday wipe it off the face of the earth. After several hours of climbing, we rise above the clouds and reach the summit of Mount Pico.
Like everyone else here on Pico, I came up here for the first time with someone from the family, with a cousin. It was an incredible night. We were partying with my relatives from Canada. It was in August. And all of a sudden we said, let's go climb the mountain. I was 15, my cousin 18. We grabbed a backpack and took off. It's a tradition to do the climb at night and to get to the peak in time for the sunrise. We didn't really know the mountain. We just kept turning right and right again. It was cold. I'll never forget it. That was the first time, and I've been doing it ever since.
Nearing the summit, we enter into a different realm, mineral and otherworldly. On the slopes of the volcano, there's only the overwhelming silence and the whisper of the wind. This is what makes Pico so moving. From this altitude, the sky and sea blend together.
We're up at 2,300 meters now, and near the crater. This is a stunning landscape. I feel like the king of the world here. All around me, there's nothing but the ocean that we can see down there. And in winter, there's nobody up here. Peace and quiet. It's wonderful. When I climb up here to the summit, I don't think about anything. It empties my mind totally. It's just the sky, the silence, and the mountain. I forget everything else. I feel
Fico completamente
totally at peace.
paz. O que eu sinto cá em cima é paz.
Mount Pico is the roof of the Atlantic, a place unlike any other on Earth, open onto the immensity of the ocean and the purity of the world.